Hey everyone, Ryan here. Just a quick reminder before we start the show that we have a Patreon, patreon.com/leftanchor. If you want to support the show and get access to extra episodes, you can sign up there. If not, that's also fine. But thanks for listening in any case. Let's get started.
Welcome back to Left Anchor. I'm Alexi the Greek.
And I'm Ryan Cooper. We're here today with our post Iowa caucus readout, reaction, whatever you might want to call it. We thought, I've been on vacation for a while. We thought 2 days would be enough to tabulate the results of the Iowa caucus, but apparently it isn't.
Had to wait until your birthday.
Yeah,
and still not done, even though it's your birthday. They did not take that into account. But
it is almost 7 p.m. here on February 5th. On Wednesday, the caucus happened on Monday, and we are still sitting at 86% of the results reported, according to the Washington Post, which I'm sure is getting the same results as everybody. And so, there, as anybody, I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast knows, it was a total clusterfuck logistics nightmare. We're talking about Kerensky's, attack in 1917 level of disaster. So, nevertheless, I think it's time to sort of take stock, to see where we're at, and try to figure out what is to be done, so to speak, and how to think about this going forward. Because we got, there's another race coming. I believe New Hampshire is on Tuesday, and we've got Nevada on the 22nd and South Carolina on the 28th.
And then Super Tuesday.
Yeah. And so it's going to be bing, bang, boom, a bunch of different races coming up, and there's going to be a whole lot of jostling and jockeying for position over the next few days and weeks.
And I think maybe a good place to start as we zoom out and say what the bleep just happened, and then we can make sense of what just happened after we figure out what just happened or what is still happening, is to say, okay, in the Democratic primary for president, Iowa is the first election, right? And it's a caucus, not a primary. And somehow that relates to the shenanigans and incompetence and malfeasance and whatnot. However, whatever combination of those things has been going on and is going on. So what can we say about the caucus as we expected it to go, like how it was supposed to be run, and then how that didn't go to plan and how things seem to have gone awry? Maybe we should break that down.
Yeah, so the caucus rules are pretty complicated. If you sat down for 20 minutes to explain everything, it's not that difficult. But as I understand it, you get all the registered Democrats, you go to your local precinct, which is a gym or something usually, and you make your sort of initial selection.
And for scale, there's about 1,700 of these precincts in Iowa, I believe.
Yeah, you're talking about fairly small numbers of people, from like a dozen or two up to a few hundred, not that many. So you make your initial selection, and, so you go stand with a candidate that like the sort of corner or something of the candidate that you support. And I believe at that point, you're locked in.
That's the first stage, the initial commitment.
The first stage. And then they go through and they see if anybody's cleared the 15% viability threshold. And
by that we mean 15% of the total number of people in the gym.
Exactly. Yes. And from there, if your candidate is not viable, then you can reallocate to the other candidates. You are unlocked, so to speak, and you can go. And there are various extremely good strategies that people have, like, hey, we've got pie and cakes over here, or we've got chairs, free beer. I think maybe you can't bring alcohol. There are a lot of rules that were not being respected, probably. but
free MDMA. I guarantee you'll do whatever
Yeah.
I tell you
yeah,
afterwards.
it's a good thing Bloomberg wasn't in this caucus because it would have been like $10,000 to every person who joins the Bloomberg caucus.
You have Steyer. You have Tom Steyer in there.
Yeah. I believe that's probably also against the rules.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so then, you have your second alignment after you've cleared out all the losers under 15%. They were, and so each precinct gets a number of delegates, based on the sort of population they represent. And then they send those delegate totals over to the state party. And then they add them up. And the state delegates are then
Converted.
Yeah, back in the old days, like back in 2016, the state delegates are converted according to a complicated ass formula into the national delegates, and that would be who won Iowa. But now, thanks to the Bernie campaign pushed for a number of changes to make the process a little bit more transparent, and so now they record the popular vote in addition to the first vote, in addition to the final, the final state delegate selection, and then finally the national delegate selection. I think there's like 41 or 43.
41 total pledged delegates from Iowa that can be representing Iowa at the end, at the national convention. So you have the popular vote recorded from that initial commitment in the gym. You have the record of what those numbers look like when people recommit after their first choice was not viable. And then that result determines the number of state delegates, right, that precinct sends to, Iowa headquarters. And then Iowa headquarters is supposed to add up all those state delegates for each candidate. And that will then determine how many pledged delegates, which is a much smaller number, right, each candidate will get out of the 41 total pledged delegates possible.
Yeah. So just a little review here. A lot of people probably already know this, but
and one other point though that people noticed, I think, in following this is that say what has tended to be the case almost universally is that Bernie Sanders might have a significant higher number of not just popular votes in the first vote, but popular votes even in the second vote, but get the same number of state delegates as, say, Buttigieg. Because of the way that they do the math to figure out delegates, there might be a discrepancy and there might be a higher number, but they don't like go down to the decimal. They don't say that you get, 17.8 delegates or something, right?
Yeah. Well, they actually do present fractions of a delegate here in the Washington Post, but that's functionally meaningless. The way they award delegates, according to like rounding out, and then if you don't meet if it's a tie of some sort, then you just flip a coin,
right.
Or you draw names out of a hat to
right.
whoever gets the balance of difference. And so,
But the point is, like, Bernie can and probably will, by like a somewhat comfortable margin, beat the second place person, which looks like Mayor Pete, in the popular vote, but may or may not win the number of pledged delegates.
Yeah, right now it's sitting at 86%. So here's the results.
So they're reporting 86% of the precincts, right?
Yeah, we have in the first alignment, Sanders got 24.3%, Buttigieg 21.6% of the vote. In the second alignment, Sanders got 26.1% and Buttigieg 25.5%.
So he won both.
Yes, he won both of the vote alignments. And in the state delegate equivalents, or whatever they're called, state delegates, Buttigieg is winning with 26.7%, and Sanders has 25.4%. Now, I've heard people speculate that will probably close up because the very last things they're going to count are the satellite caucuses of all the Iowans who live overseas and in different states and so on. And he was the only one who even contested those at all. And so likely he will come up a bit in the state delegate count. And so who the fuck knows at the end of the day. But I think it's fair to conclude that Bernie won.
Bernie won because he won the popular vote, and he's likely going to tie or win the pledged delegates.
Yeah, the pledged delegates, which the state delegates are completely meaningless at the end of the day. It's just the representation of the arcane mechanics of this fucking caucus nonsense. And popular vote is just like how many people, at the person with the most votes wins, which is a very intuitive and easy to understand standard of victory. And then the pledged delegates, which is actually the mechanics of how the convention will operate in, June or whenever it is. And so that will be likely tied or within one, almost certainly. And so,
And again, if it's like 10 and 10, they each got 10 pledged delegates. That's a minuscule number compared to the number needed.
Exactly.
Right. So to win the nomination in an outright fashion where you don't have a brokered convention, without any help from other pledged delegates moving to your camp at the end, you'd need almost half of the 4,000 total pledged delegates available in all the 50 states plus, So you have, 10 out of that is not very much, but that is not why you might think, well, why then does Iowa matter at all? Right?
Who gives a shit?
Yeah. And this gets into the pragmatics and the strategy and the way that media narratives and donor money and the path to victory involves campaign finance and psychology and so many other things that is being fucked with directly by the failures of Iowa.
Now we're getting into it.
Yeah. So the question then becomes, what effect does it have and who's to blame? And is the blame something that has to do with incompetence or malice and preference for non-Bernie candidates? So let's kind of unpack what the options are and dig into it.
Yeah, so we're all sitting here. It's 2 days. This is by far the longest it's ever been before we've had the full Iowa caucus results. And the reason supposedly is that they set up an app. They did an app. Oh, thank God.
There's an app for that.
What app has ever fucked up? But the state Democratic Party apparently on advice from the DNC, importantly, the New York Times reported that, they were just going to do a big phone bank, and the DNC pushed them not to do that. And so they went with an app, which was built by a bunch of, party insiders.
Named Shadow.
Yeah, his name's Shadow.
Can't make this shit up.
Which is I think it's a for-profit company, which is owned by a non-profit company called Acronym. And that, there's all kinds of Democratic insiders on that, a ton of ex-Obama and ex-Hillary Clinton people. The Pod Save America boys are on that, a couple of them. I think Tommy Vitor and John Favreau are on like the board of that. David Plouffe, who Chris Hayes confronted him about this.
I think because David Dayen tweeted him to do so. Yeah,
Twitter matters sometimes, and he said, "I'm a volunteer on the board." Like,
what?
What the fuck does that mean?
Board members are not paid. That's not how that works.
Yeah. And
in other words, the board. Being on a board is powerful because of the people you're connected to and your influence in the decisions made by this company, right? And if it's a board of advisors, then there's no stock involved either. But so in any case, there's some real kind of insiders involved in the company that created the app, and there's an investment.
Yeah, so the Verge, did some reporting in this. Noah Colwin did a great piece in. I think the Outline or somewhere else, the Motherboard, Vice at Motherboard got into the actual source code of the app, and then just find this thing is absolute fucking dog shit. You're talking like bargain basement Facebook game level of coding and effort put into this thing. Because what happened was on the night that they, on caucus night, all these precinct captains and so on went to turn on their app, and the fucker just didn't work at all.
And that's where they were supposed to upload the data.
Yeah, that's where they're supposed to punch in their totals, and it just wasn't working. And so they called up the state headquarters, and the state headquarters did not have enough people on, in their basement or whatever to take the calls.
No plan B.
People were sitting on hold for hours, multiple hours sometimes, just waiting to, to give their results in. And, people tabulated this stuff, and eventually, a lot of them gave up. They called back the next morning and so on. But, I've seen a lot of people blame this on the Sanders campaign asking for more transparency around the rules, which did on one level make it more complicated.
Insofar as there's more to report.
There's more to report. But
that has nothing to do with how long you're on hold because no one was working.
Yep, that's right. Exactly. I mean, it made it more difficult, but that was 4 years ago, almost 3.5 years ago when they made this decision. And so, they've had ample time to prepare, and it's not that difficult.
Let's be clear. The math is not hard.
No, the math is not hard. The caucus procedure is complicated, but it's not that complicated. It's nothing that you couldn't have, 9 or 10 sort of sessions over the course of a couple of years to go through this all, very carefully and over again to be like, here's the procedure. You got to be very careful. And then on election night, you have your backup phone bank with 20, 30, 40, 50 people there who can just take this, you're talking about what, a 1, 2, 3 minute phone call at latest. So here's my initial result. Here's my second result, final alignment, whatever.
And I figured out to do the math. Let's assume you don't even have a calculator. You don't need any, you just do the math by hand. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say you want to verify that, that the math is right and you want to get rid of human error. So you say, let's assign 2 people to independently do the math. Okay, there's 1,700 precincts. All right, so that's 3,400 precincts. Okay, how long does it take to do a basic math problem?
It depends on who you are.
Right, no, but but let's say a minute. That's a pretty long time to do just arithmetic.
Yes,
right?
Stacking up a column of numbers. Yeah.
So 3,400 minutes is the total number of labor hours we need.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. How long does it take, right? To have that would just be 2 people working, right? 3,400 minutes, I should say. 3,400 minutes. How many hours is that?
Yeah, I mean, I forget who made this comment on Twitter, but if you had recorded the results on parchment paper with a quill and sent them in via horseback from all the counties, they would have been done yesterday.
Well, and the way that we know that is they came up with 69% of it very, very quickly, and then dragged their feet tremendously after that, right?
Yeah,
and insofar as the initial delay was because people were on hold on the phone for 4 hours, that wasn't true anymore because people were talking about how they reported their precinct information 24 hours ago. So it makes sense in a way that the math wasn't the problem, but the collecting the data and the phones are tied up or whatever. But once you have all the information, actually producing, even if you're double checking, that can't possibly take very long. I don't even
know.
And
then this, just before we started recording, they're releasing a few more dribs and drabs of results, and here's a tweet from Chris Schwartz, who is the Blackhawk County Iowa supervisor, and he was a precinct captain of the Blackhawk County caucus, and he's saying he said in this latest round of results that the party was, not only did they screw up the delegate allocation and the vote total in the last couple of hours, but that they were giving votes to fucking Deval Patrick, who did not even campaign and had 0 votes.
Right.
I
saw that.
Nobody fucking voted for the, I don't think he was even registered. Yeah. And so,
so there seem to be discrepancies that it looks like.
Yeah. And when Iowa Democrats, the Iowa Democratic Party posted some results online, there's just some random Twitter guy named Phil Jameson who is saying like, pointing at this issue here, says, "Hey, looks like you accidentally swapped Deval Patrick's and Bernie's columns in the rows between 3, 4, and 4, 2. You also switched Tom Steyer and Elizabeth Warren results for the same rows." And like,
yeah, that's some shady.
They've had 2 days
Right.
to figure this shit out. I mean, this is like elementary spreadsheet shit that anybody could have been able to figure out in 30 seconds.
Well, so here's the thing, and there's a lot of, the discourse. There's a lot of talk about incompetence, and then there's a lot of talk about this is intentional, or some of this has to be intentional. I don't think anyone's claiming, I mean, maybe some people are, but no one's really saying that from the get-go they planned for the app to crash right? But there does seem to be evidence that incompetence is seeming like an insufficient explanation for some of the shenanigans like you just spoke of. It makes a lot more sense that some of this is intentional, just because,
or at least a sort of like a quiet or almost maybe an unconscious conspiracy of incompetence. That just like, you're looking at this thing, results are coming in, and
they look good for Bernie.
They're bad for
your guy, for Biden or for Klobuchar or for
Bernie winning is terrible. Mm-hmm. Like, and we need to double check everything. And
I mean, this is in the wake of the Des Moines Register's famous most important poll getting canceled at the last minute because I don't know, there was some irregularities.
Well, you know what happened there? Mayor Pete complained because one of his supporters claimed that they hadn't been asked about whether or not they support Pete in the phone survey, which I find like that is pretty fucking hard to believe. Like if you're doing a poll survey, why would you leave out like the top 2 or 3 contender? Yeah. But regardless, like that's pretty narrow fucking.
I just think that you have to consider that as part of the context in which this is taking place, right? So that happens, which is already weird and shady and never happened before. And then you have, so if we travel back in time to the night that we were all expecting for the results to come in, it's like, okay, it's a delay. The app went down. Sure. Maybe it'll take a few more hours. Speaking of TV and Twitter, Brian Williams on MSNBC basically says, I think for obvious reasons, boy, it sure would make sense for some candidates to take advantage of this free airtime and make some speeches right now. Which is like, obviously the networks would love that because they're just talking about how they don't know anything for hours.
Yeah.
But literally within a little bit of time, Klobuchar, somebody must have seen Brian Williams say that and nudged Klobuchar and said, go out there and give a speech.
Or they were thinking the same thing.
Maybe so. Who knows? It doesn't matter. But then the thing that changes is that when Mayor Pete gives his speech,
he declares victory.
He says in a really sleazy, slick way, without saying that they won, I'm confident we'll emerge victorious when all this settles, and just basically gives a victory speech, right? Without explicitly saying that they won.
He didn't. It was sort of like George W. Bush talking about Iraq and 9/11.
Mission accomplished?
No, Iraq and 9/11
Oh, okay. Right.
in 2002.
Oh, the connection between
They
the two?
never said it exactly. They just implied it 100 million times.
Right.
And yeah, an improbable hope has become an undeniable reality.
Yeah, we have shocked the world.
Yeah, 0% of results in Pete.
We emerge victorious. And the thing, so it's funny. My first thought was actually, oh, he's hedging. Because we know that Mayor Pete has staked everything on Iowa, has been there for so long, spent so much time and money there. It's his only chance to have any path that's viable at all. And so my first thought was, oh, he's hedging. Like, if he ends up winning, these will be the clips that will be replayed over and over again of him talking about how they shocked the world and da-da-da-da. And if he doesn't win, or if it's a tie, like, so what that he pretended that they won, right? Like, I'm just seeing the cynical move, you know, it's kind of like Pascal's wager or something for proclaiming. But now it could be even worse than that. It could be even sneakier than that.
Well, he was clearly trying to have it both ways. Yeah. You know, like in later interviews, he said, well, I wasn't really declaring victory, you know, but like he wanted,
he literally said, we will emerge victorious from this.
Yeah. I mean, anyone listening to that would assume that
victory doesn't mean first place.
Yeah. The victorious 49ers in the Super Bowl. They came in second, didn't they? I mean, it was just a move, obviously, of the purest cynicism, just to be like, well, there's no results, and you know, we don't really know who won. We're pretty sure we did well according to our own internal data, which is true, and just jump out there and just try to create a triumphal narrative by lying about what you know at the time.
And here's the thing. The reason, as we said, that Iowa is important is not because of the number of delegates that you might win.
No, and quite the opposite.
Whether Buttigieg or Bernie wins or gets second, it might not make any difference in pledged delegates, right? They might tie, or there might be one delegate difference. What matters is the narrative.
Yep.
And so to preemptively claim the narrative, and here's the thing, and we can get into this talk of conspiracy theorism and theorists, right? Here's the thing. So when they delayed the results, okay, you're going to delay it. So why don't you just delay it until you finish them and then like say what the results were? No. At 5 p.m. on Tuesday, we're going to release 50%, they said. This is what they said. Yeah. They said, we'll release 50% of the precinct results. Which precincts? How did they decide? Were they the ones that came in? Seemingly not, because some of them came in that didn't report. Okay, whatever. For some reason, you want to release 50%. Oh, they ended up waiting a little bit past 5, and they released 69%, which happened...
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. Happened to slightly favor Mayor Pete in terms of not the popular vote, which is still Bernie's, but in terms of the state delegates. And they can spin that, and they did spin that as Buttigieg in the lead, you know, Mayor Pete in the lead.
Yep.
Not considering like who's stronger in which counties have been reported or any of that. And then like nothing. For a long while.
Yeah.
How many
hours and hours?
Hours later, they release another 9% of the precincts?
Yeah, something like that.
And I'm just thinking, like, how are they deciding when to release what? And, like, is it a coincidence that when they release something, it's a slight edge for Mayor Pete after he gave the preemptive victory speech?
Yeah.
After he canceled, basically, the Des Moines Register poll?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, my only conclusion is that you couldn't make this look more like a Democratic like party frame up job to try to make it appear as if Pete won the caucus, even though he didn't, by strategically delaying the results. And I mean, I think it certainly could be the case that it is merely pure stupidity and utter fucking like just infantile incompetence that is the why they can't add up like 10 numbers on a spreadsheet over 2 fucking days.
By the way, did we mention that Mayor Pete personally invested in the app?
Yeah, it's true. I
mean,
doesn't
he own? Isn't it like 30% of it?
Well, I don't know about that.
Some significant amount of investment, I think.
Yeah, I mean, these consulting firms, you know, they do a lot of different things.
Right. So 30% of the firm, right, that made the app. So that's, I think, the way to put it. But
I don't think it was directly involved in the app itself.
Well, I think it's pretty direct to be like part owner of the firm that created the app that also has these other DNC insiders involved. Like, come on. I mean, if you're trying to make, in terms of conspiracy theories, if you're trying to make some outlandish thing, this is not outlandish. This is like right in your face.
It stanks.
Well, and so to get to conspiracy theories, I want to remind everyone who doesn't already know this that to conspire simply means that more than one person was involved in organizing something, right? Like Ryan and I are conspiring to make a podcast right now. We're conspiring.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
A conspiracy theory, a theory is simply like a form of explanation that describes or explains some event, some fact, something. That's one way to think of a theory. I mean, the actual root of the word means like a view or something. Like to see something in a certain light is to kind of understand what it is, right? So conspiracy theory, like on its face, is just like an explanation for something that happened that involved more than one person. Now, when people deride conspiracy theories, what they're really critiquing is the lack of evidence for the particular explanation of a certain event. And there's this association with paranoia, and there's a lot that you could get into. But the thing that's like bad about those kind of conspiracy theories is that there's insufficient reason or evidence to think that that explanation is the explanation.
Yeah. And
therefore, you say you're just a conspiracy theorist because you're kind of just assuming that certain people are responsible for something when there's not really a good reason to. It doesn't seem to make sense, actually, that would be the case. And you could poke holes in the reasoning, right?
Yeah.
Killing Soleimani, conspiracy theory, right? Like, guess what? Trump and his generals decided to do it, and they did it, and they conspired.
Yeah.
So
conspiracy fact.
Exactly. Well, no, but the explanation, the theory might be they thought that this would be good politically, whatever. That's the explanation, and then they did it, right? So
there was a conspiracy. Right. There was a conspiracy to destroy Gawker by Peter Thiel, who funded frivolous lawsuits that were totally unrelated to his grievance in secret to destroy that publication. That actually happened,
and that's verified. By the way, I think a lot of actually derided conspiracy theories. Some of them are probably true. The problem is you don't know which ones are true.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And so to assume they're all true is problematic. But like lots of things we're not privy to happen right behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so the problem is to think that you know which ones happened and why.
Yeah, and you're right. And so like it is very hard to know what to think about all this, I think. You know, I initially I was like, well, it's just all incompetence. But I mean, it's like every mistake they've had.
How do the mistakes function? What are they doing? Right?
They've always disadvantaged Sanders and even Warren too, and are boosting up Pete and fucking
masking the total fucking collapse of Joe Biden.
Yep. Yeah. I would say the major beneficiary of this muddled media coverage is Biden. You know, Sanders has lost. And Warren has lost because Warren did actually pretty well in the caucus. We can get into that later. But Sanders lost his like victory lap, but Biden did not get, you know, a media cycle of just like utter failure.
He was in fourth, barely ahead of Klobuchar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So bringing up the rear, significantly outperformed by Warren, way outperformed by Buttigieg and Sanders.
Yeah.
Which is huge for him because he has just big donors, right?
Yeah, big donors. And his only argument is, I can win an election.
Right.
And his first election he's had since 2012, he fucking face plants.
And he
epically.
is the kind of all-American blue-collar candidate, apparently, right? Like just your Uncle Joe. Joe. And Uncle Joe in Iowa, white, blue-collar Iowa.
Yep. Farmers and
right?
cheese-formed people.
Among moderates, lost dramatically to Buttigieg among moderates and barely outperformed Klobuchar.
He lost to Pizza Rat. But so, you know, I think it's definitely not the case that there was a preformed conspiracy to rig the vote totals or anything like that. I mean, first of all, there's there's way too many people are involved. Lots and lots of people have seen all the different totals from all the precincts, and like that was going to come out. And in fact, it did come out when they screwed up these totals. But you look at like New York elections, or some of these other machine politics states where they're constantly fucking up registrations, and the procedures are all just a nightmare. Like a lot of people who are registered, they go in, oh, you're not registered, and it's some paperwork hang up or another. And I think it's not an accident, even if people are not deliberately fucking up they're not saying to themselves, I will malevolently not do this right. Like, it is to the benefit of the party establishment, the machine hacks, the fucking like app vendors, and the sort of galaxy of grifter consultants who get paid millions of dollars to carry out all these various contracts and so forth, to just not do things well.
But also, I think whether it's conscious or subconscious, should we release results once they're all in? Nah, let's release some of them at some point.
Yeah.
Oh, how are we going to do that? I don't know. What are they looking like now? Well, Bernie's way up.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to wait until more come in.
Yeah, we need to check these.
How about now? Well, technically, Pete's in the lead with state delegates. All right, let's release right now. 69%. That sounds like a good number of precincts to report. Right,
Is that right?
You can imagine that decisions like that. I mean, come on, these people.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Even Chris Matthews, who's obviously not part of the DNC or part of the Iowa, but like is just so obviously as like a quote unquote objective journalist or whatever, just literally showing his disgust that Bernie Sanders has a chance of winning the nomination, and just kind of, MSNBC is just so clearly in the bag for anyone but Bernie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not impossible to think that kind of reasoning or sort of like self-deception happened, and
which is why they're also not reporting Bernie basically won, Biden tanks. Like a good journalist, right? Good journalist would say, yeah, this mess up is a huge story. You know what's also a big story? Right, as we approach New Hampshire and the other primaries, it's a big story that Biden totally fell on his face. It's a big story that all this organizing done by the Sanders campaign seems to be like they're the representative of the left, especially going into New Hampshire where he seems to have an even bigger lead, right?
Yeah. Maybe this gets us into the sort of general takeaways here. Number one, Bernie won. Bernie almost certainly has a popular vote locked up. He will probably be tied in delegates, and the state delegate thing is totally irrelevant. I mean, who wins is a totally arbitrary categorization, given how many different like things you could pick to represent that. And popular vote, I would say, is the most legitimate one of all.
Right,
even more legitimate than the national delegate totals, the pledged delegates.
Yeah, if you're looking at the practical, then you look at the pledged delegates, which he's going to probably tie.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at legitimacy, that's the popular vote.
Yep. And I would say secondary, the most important thing is that Biden got fucking rinsed. He just got stomped. He in that poll that Mayor Pete prevented from coming out, he was in fourth place, I think, but he did even worse than that. I think he was coming in at 15% of the vote, and I think he got 13, something like that. He underperformed the polls, which already had him,
which is like 1 or 2 points higher than Klobuchar, I think.
Yeah, he just barely beat
and
Klobuchar.
a couple percentages under Warren, right?
Yeah.
So it was like roughly, as far as we can tell, Bernie and Mayor Pete are hovering around the 26% mark, something like that.
Thereabouts.
And then the next highest is Warren at 15, which is quite a drop. I believe.
I
Is
think
that
in
right?
the final vote,
Or did she get
Warren
more?
was about 20.
Oh, she's up to 20, is she? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's changed.
Yeah.
So,
She,
which is not popular, but in terms of...
in the popular vote, she got 20.4%. In the delegates, she got 18%.
18, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So around 26 for Bernie and Mayor Pete at this point, with 86% precincts reporting. Then a drop off to Warren is to 18%.
Yeah.
So a good like 8 percentage point difference. And then the drop off there to Biden is another 3% or 2 or 3%. And then another couple percentage points to Klobuchar, right?
Yep.
And those are the only 5 that have any discernible numbers at all, right?
Yeah. Biden beat Klobuchar by less than 3,000 votes.
Wow.
I mean, fucking pathetic. And this strikes right to the heart of his entire candidacy.
This whole argument, yeah.
And this is the only time he's faced a real serious election. And he just folded like a wet noodle. And so I would say, honestly, that's probably the most important story coming out of this. Is like Biden in his only political contest he's faced in 6 years, 8 years almost. He just got fucking stomped.
And he was, and I mean, you could say he still is in a sense, but he was the biggest competitor to Bernie Sanders. In terms of like demographic support and the kind of demographics in the various states needed, right? He is the only person other than Bernie Sanders to have a high non-white, right, support in the Democratic Party.
Black women, big Biden supporters. And that could be and so this maybe gets
the takeaway,
it gets into the future, of whether or not people start to abandon his campaign, because New Hampshire's coming up. Last time I checked, Bernie was ahead by 10 points in New Hampshire, and that he's been there for weeks already, and probably nobody's going to be able to out campaign him. It's right next door to Vermont. He should be able to win pretty easily. After that, you move to Nevada. Nevada is heavily Latino, as everyone knows, and Sanders has been very strong among
in
Latinos.
Iowa, he smoked everyone, right?
Yeah.
With the Latino vote, with non-white votes generally.
Yeah. And so, my sense for Biden is that his supporters are people who they're frightened. They're defensive voters. They're people who think, well, we can't take a risk on Bernie Sanders. Look at this cranky old weirdo.
Let's back the electable candidate.
Yeah.
We just need a lot of people just want to beat Trump, whatever that takes.
He's familiar. He was vice president, maybe some lingering Obama halo. But if Biden, whether Bernie won in Iowa or not, Biden got stomped.
For sure.
He's going to get stomped in New Hampshire again, almost certainly.
It's a no confidence vote from the moderates and from the people that think electability matters the most. And Klobuchar's right there with him. Mayor Pete outperformed him.
And even if given the fact that New Hampshire is also pretty white, but then you move to Nevada, which is not terribly white, and Biden loses again. There hadn't been that many polls of that. Last I saw, Sanders is only behind by a couple of points. At that point,
keep in mind, by that point, a lot of small changes can relate to the amount of money you have to spend on advertising, and he's going to lose donations and not get the kind of funding coming off of Iowa and New Hampshire that Bernie's going to get. And so after Nevada, South Carolina is the end of the line, basically.
Yeah, and Sanders, last I checked, was only a few points behind, 4 or 5 points behind Biden. And so if Sanders cracks if he wins South Carolina, I would say that's basically it.
It's game over. In the sense that no one else could win the majority of delegates. So there still is a chance that the brokered convention results because, there's a plurality that Bernie wins. but enough are taken away that he doesn't break 50% of the delegates. And that's another reason why, in terms of the chicanery, the Bloomberg stuff seems to loom as part of the same context. It seems like, hey, there's a billionaire who's flooding. I don't know about you. I see a goddamn Bloomberg ad online, on the TV, every time I'm looking. And he's just like Steyer is, manufacturing support, right? Just by like spending millions and millions and millions of dollars. If that is just to take away enough delegates so that Bernie doesn't get 50%, then we have to deal with a brokered convention. But at least it seems like at this point, the likelihood is no one else seems to have the path to the majority like Bernie does.
Yeah. I mean, anything could change, in the next few weeks. But the most likely, course of events seems to me that 538 of all places,
Nate Silver
put him at the highest chance of winning the plurality of delegates.
Yeah, even our hated Nate Silver.
Yeah, and they said that his Biden's chance of winning a plurality plunged by half, from 40% to 20% after the Iowa caucus.
Oh, I guess we should talk about the other possible candidates, right? Because Biden's the one we're talking about for a reason. Yeah. He's the one that seemed like he had the institutional support and the national recognition and the non-white voters. But if he's not the guy, Mayor Pete has basically no support from non-white people. Basically zero.
Yeah,
for good reason, right?
Mayor Pete has put all his chips into Iowa, and he's made himself the most hated candidate of the left, which actually does have some influence. Yeah, he's just such a liar, and he does not share our politics, and he's patently a cynical, oleaginous cretin who will say anything to get elected and will sell out his constituents for a nickel. He is nationally, he's way behind. He's way behind in New Hampshire. He's barely even registering in the South. And this is what killed Bernie Sanders in 2016, was that he couldn't compete in the South. And Hillary Clinton beat him by like 30, 40, 50, I think 70 points in Mississippi. And so,
and that's the other thing. In part, that's because Bernie wasn't as known a name like Hillary was, or like Biden is. And so you could say like Mayor Pete's just unknown. He's a mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and he'll be known. But you know what? When he gets known, he's going to be known for like being really bad on racial issues in South Bend, for example, with like police shootings and how he's dealt with that or not dealt with that.
Firing all the black city employees, the black police chief.
Putting up some token pictures of people from Africa on his, just like really, really bad statements that are like really racist,
And he doesn't have, Biden at least has the argument in terms of like electability and steadiness of having been in politics for forever. Just like Bernie does, since the 1980s. But Buttigieg he's a fucking pipsqueak. He's been, he's been the mayor of a town, the 305th largest city in the country. He won his last election with like a margin of 8,000 votes before Iowa. If he actually can be said to win that or to tie that. He has no even state level experience of any kind.
He's like a Mackenzie gay Mitt Romney, right? Like a slick, cynical politician who is trying to take advantage of identity politics in the negative sense, but whose actual policies would harm LGBTQ people and would harm people of color and would harm the marginalized. But he speaks 7 languages and he can say, I'm going to fuck you over in Norwegian. Right.
Yeah.
But like, he'll just talk about triangulation. This guy is a slick operator who will Depends what the meaning of is.
Yeah.
And that's what you basically depends what the meaning of victorious is, right? Like he's already doing it.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. He you know, this is the piece I wrote for tomorrow, but you know, you see people's character come out in times of stress, and that was it was just like, all right, I'm gonna jump in there, and I'm gonna stomp all over these stupid people, you know, just a conscious cynicism, you know, and lying.
And this is what the establishment wants, because they didn't come out, Iowa and the DNC didn't come out and say, well, maybe Pete shouldn't have been claiming victory. I mean, we don't know yet. We haven't released all of the precinct.
Any of the precincts.
In fact, let's let that narrative, let's let his speech and the narrative run for a while. And it doesn't even matter how intentional it is, but like, it's certainly, there's no one, as you say, standing up in a moment like this and saying, hey, wait a minute. It seems like this is bullshit. It seems like by any indication, you know, whether it's the journalists that should be talking about Biden's collapse or the fact that Bernie was totally discounted, or about the fact that Warren, who's the other progressive competing, she did like fine.
Yeah, but she did quite well, actually. She overperformed the polls where Biden underperformed them. Yeah.
In terms of managing expectations, she overperformed the polls, but like, she's a significant distance from the other progressive, right?
Yeah, she is. Yeah. And I would say, you know, I mean, so as we've said, you know, Bernie in national poll averages, he's within a few points of Biden. Biden, I think if he gets rinsed again in New Hampshire,
like if he finishes third or fourth, something like that,
I think it's pretty likely that's the end of it for him. You know, he's just going to start to collapse. He's going to start losing money.
Well, it's a matter, and that is a function of when does the money run out? Like literally when the candidates leave is when they run out of money.
Yeah. And he's already struggled with raising money, and he doesn't have a huge personal fortune. The Buttigieg, you know, unless he can pull something out of his hat in New Hampshire or Nevada, which seems pretty unlikely,
he'll also run out of money.
Yeah, I mean, that trick of trying to declare victory didn't even work that well. You know, he got a fair amount of pushback from people being like, "Hey, we don't know who won yet. Like, what are you talking about, dude?" Right. You know, some people who really like him, you know, that. Edward Isaac Dovray or whatever his name is at The Atlantic was like, oh, didn't you know that Pete's a ruthless, cynical operator from the Weyland-Yutani Corporation? Like, yes, I knew that. Thank you. You don't need to tell me that. Jesus Christ. Warren, I think, is kind of the wild card. She did pretty well. I don't think she's going to get a media bounce out of coming like just barely basically in second place, you know, beyond the two tied front runners.
After the two. Yeah. But if she somehow pulled out New Hampshire, then she's back in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I definitely wouldn't count her out. Right, you know, she's proven to be a pretty dogged campaigner, even if her strategic sense is kind of wobbly. And that leaves Klobuchar. I think you can kind of write her off. You know, she's not going to.
She got fifth place.
Yeah. But that leaves Bloomberg.
Yes.
Bloomberg, the fucking
billionaire
Jaws shark.
Billionaire faux Republican.
Yeah. No, I mean, actual
faux Democrat, actual Republican, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard, you know, he is near in national polls. I think he's ahead of Pete. Or, no, he's ahead of Klobuchar.
I think he's probably also, he might be ahead of Pete.
He's into double digits.
Yeah.
And just on the strength of spending.
Right.
Like
it's the same as like
$100 million, almost $200 million, I think now that he doubled his ad spend after the Iowa caucus, and he has more staffers than Bernie, and he's just trying to buy the nomination, and so far that seems to be working like pretty well in terms of polls and in terms of, you know, media coverage and so on.
Tom Steyer, I think, bought his way into third place in the South Carolina polls just by.
Yeah,
I mean, nobody's heard of this guy, but
he spent like $20 million in Iowa and got like 4% or something.
Right. And there is it's certainly the case that maybe Bloomberg is polling well because he's a familiar name. He's spending $100 million. But then once you get closer to that specific state, like once people that are going to vote in a particular state actually realize, oh, I better actually do my due diligence and figure out what's going on here. Maybe they'll realize, oh, that's not who I want to vote for. Right.
Yeah.
But he's a threat. That's true.
He's definitely a threat, and I mean, that's the thing that I would look at over the next few weeks is I'm not sure if he's going to be on the debate on Friday or not.
That's more of the graft and corruption we were talking about.
Yeah,
so when you situate these quote unquote conspiracy theories, which are just ways to explain like what you think people with power are doing. Okay, well, people in power, literally the DNC, didn't change the rules that would permit, Cory Booker and Julian Castro to make it onto the debate stage because we got to stick to we can't just change what the rules are for who's allowed to be on the stage at the debate. Oh, Bloomberg, who gave $300,000 to the DNC right before he entered the race. Oh, sure, we'll change the rules for you to come on in. Come on in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and that's like a nice lunch for a normal person. Yeah. 300,000.
Keep in mind that whether it's Chris Matthews or the DNC or James Carville, right? These people hate Bernie not because they don't like his sense of humor or his style. He's literally the embodiment of the threat to their power and their ability to retain as an elite class and a donor class, literally the rule over at least their party. And hopefully, in different ways, the various offices their party wins.
Yeah, that's a secondary consideration. Right, winning, who cares about that?
That's totally secondary because they don't want to be accountable to other people outside of their networks, outside of their circles. And so if the fucking billionaire who's one of them, part of their class, right, part of their cabal, if you will, of elites, wants to help put down the one candidate who is threatening to actually make the Democratic Party democratic, kratia or kratos, rule by the demos, by the people. Fuck yeah, come on the debate stage, baby.
Yeah. Suddenly, like, we have to make an exception. We have to. It's like you have a lot of motivated reasoning and people being very, very squirrely about this. But like, it's because he gave them fucking bunch of money. Like, of course it is. Like, let's not be children about this.
This is not rocket science. This is not the moon landing didn't happen. This is like people in power will benefit from doing the few things that they can do to keep their power and influence and to like harm a movement that would threaten their power. This is not really like weird logic operating. It's like very straightforward personal interest operation, right? Like,
yeah. But all that said, the thing about Bloomberg, he has a record of horrible sexism and misogyny, just publicly recorded and attested comment. I mean, not literally recorded, but like people have testified to his comments saying like, look at the ass on her. You should kill it about a pregnant employee. Just running a very sexist and patriarchal company. He, as mayor, had a violently racist policing
stop
policy.
and frisk.
Yeah. I mean, this was a thing where they had more arrests of black men in New York City than there are black men in New York City. People getting jacked up multiple times a year for nothing because they're black.
He also loves war. He was with Trump on the Soleimani assassination.
And he was
on board.
Yep. He was with George W. Bush on the Iraq invasion. And that back then
didn't he speak at the Republican convention?
He absolutely did. He was a Republican then. And he endorsed George W. Bush at the Republican convention in 2004, thanked him for starting the Iraq war, and said, thank God for George W. Bush. That, like, I would say arguably worse than Joe Biden in terms of his overall
policies.
Political record. Mm-hmm. Biden at least, Biden's been involved in a lot of really bad shit over the years, the bankruptcy bill, stopping school integration, and so on. But like, Bloomberg was an executive. You're talking about someone who's making primary decisions, not being one vote among 100. And those decisions were fucking atrocious. Privatization, neoliberalism, racist policing, and George endorsing George fucking W. Bush. And so I really have trouble believing that guy could he hasn't had any scrutiny at all.
Right. You wrote about this in a book review, but like it might not be the case that ideology is the only thing that matters, or that policies are what totally dictate how people vote.
Yeah.
But it's not true that it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah. It matters a little bit, especially when you're talking about someone who is so incredibly out of the mainstream of the party coalition. And in addition to all that, like, he is overtly trying to buy the nomination.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
Like, he might as well just be handing a sack of cash to every Democratic voter in the country instead of handing a sack of cash to Facebook and Google and every fucking local news station in the country. But, I think there are a lot of sort of just rubes, people, normies who just aren't paying attention, like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good ad.
And not only that, there are, look, Spinoza has a line, Baruch Spinoza, philosopher, medieval period, that's translated into English as something like, how is it that we desire our own oppression? And I think of that line when I think of people who are like in the wake of climate change and all the drastic inequality and marginalizations and oppressions that come from neoliberalism and capitalism. I still see so many people who are like, the elites will save us. Look at how successful this billionaire was. He must really be great. I think he can take on Trump because he's so smart. Like, they totally drink the ideological, like, superstructure, if you will, like the water. They're swimming in it. They're drinking it. They're drinking the Kool-Aid. And that, these are the people that are, they love their oppression. They love their oppressors. Or they're privileged enough to not care about the difference between oppression and freedom. And it's just kind of the image. Look, the image of Trump and the image of Obama couldn't be more different. You have the vulgar, misogynistic, like literally ugly, like just,
pile
grotesque,
of separating flesh.
Yeah, just like the image of them, and then you have Obama, the erudite, the slick, literally like with his fingers, like as if they were chopsticks, like killed a fly during an interview, can pop the 3-point shot still, right? Like can quote Rumi extemporaneously. Calm, not like a toddler throwing a tantrum, just smooth, very reasonable, rational.
Never angry, even when he should be angry.
And yet, if you actually care not about image, but policy and the people's lives affected by the power instantiated through the policy, guess who handed over to Trump the drone assassination program? Guess who was deporter in chief? Trump, granted, more cruel version of it, right?
Yep.
But like,
guess who fucked up the bank bailout and basically deliberately caused 10 million foreclosures in this country?
But if you're privileged enough where the power used in those harmful ways didn't affect you, well, I care. Or
you didn't notice.
Or you didn't notice, you don't know about it. I care about civility. I care about, image.
Yeah. I want a guy who reads Reinhold Niebuhr in the White House.
Well, right. So like, if you're just upset that Trump is a dick, right, and kind of trolls the libs,
I'm very upset.
And that's what you think equates to injustice, then maybe you're a Mike Bloomberg guy. You know what I mean? You could be seduced by that. But like you said, there are people I think that could be converted to seeing the light.
And this I think would be, I think we should be increasing, now that Biden has collapsed, I think we should be increasingly worried about Bloomberg. If Biden loses in New Hampshire, then I think there's going to be a big scramble to get behind Bloomberg because he could spend a functionally infinite amount of money. But the thing about it is, it's like there's a lot of those type of people, who really are more or less incapable of caring about structural racism or like the injustice of the carceral state and imperialism and so on, but like have adopted, rhetorical commitments to rolling back that kind of stuff. And Bloomberg is so blatantly out of step.
Oh, people will vote for Trump over him on those issues. Did you see the Trump move during the Super Bowl where he had the advertisement, with the criminal justice reform being highlighted by a black woman who was thanking Trump for the First Step Act?
I mean,
and then the State of the Union speech, he kind of tried to reach out, talking about criminal justice reform and talking about being pro-union. So he's.
It is I think Bloomberg would be less overtly corrupt and less unstable and insane in office, but it's not clear to me who would be worse on criminal justice between those two. Both their records are fucking appalling, and. I mean, honestly, I think, but Trump's been really making a play for the black vote over the, that was
cynically probably,
mostly, but he did sign that milquetoast criminal justice reform bill, and here you have this elfin billionaire who's 3.5 feet tall, and he's just like the representation of Wall Street corruption.
Don't be ableist, Ryan.
Worse than Hillary Clinton. It's not his fault.
No.
Worse than Hillary Clinton on all the issues, and more like just connected with the sort of elite of the financial oligarchy.
Yes.
Just he is Jewish, right? I believe so, but that whether that's the case or not, like he is like one of the richest people in the world and is connected to the world. I
just want to make sure I understand why you mentioned it. If he's Jewish, is because Trump will try to like use anti-Semitic.
I mean, I just don't. I don't want to play into these anti-Semitic tropes myself, but like you can't deny the fact that he is a oligarch.
Right.
He is part of the wealthy elite,
which has nothing to do with being Jewish.
No, not at all. But that is going to be a tough sell against Trump, and I think a lot of people are going to look at that and be like, "Why the fuck are we putting up a Wall Street billionaire against Trump?" Well,
which is why part of me is not that worried about Bloomberg again. Like Bernie,
it's hard to be concerned, but
I mean, he's got so much money. But if Bernie had to create a foil, come on, the Wall Street billionaire.
Yeah,
come on,
Bernie also
the Wall
Jewish,
Street billionaire. Bernie, of course, but the Wall Street billionaire who's trying to buy the election. Come on,
I would like to like that. That would
the debate stage will be hilarious.
Yeah, is he going to be on the stage on Friday?
I don't know.
I've heard disputing reports about that, but yeah, if he is on there, it would be just. Bernie has not really gone hard at anybody in one of these debates, but I think all of the candidates would go, maybe with the exception of Biden or Klobuchar, Mayor Pete, but at least Bernie and Warren, and maybe Biden too. I mean, because it's just so nakedly corrupt, this former Republican asshole.
By the way, I think the Biden and then the Bloomberg logic, which is, he's a name we recognize who's got electability going in his favor, that diminishes the more that Bernie is successful, the less and less Bloomberg is the guy that seems electable, and the more Bernie seems like the person who's electable.
Yeah, he's the compromise candidate.
Well, you have someone who's supported by people out of principle, and then more and more for pragmatic reasons by other people.
But you look, I mean, Jesus, I mean, thinking even aside from, the Bernie or bust crew, like imagine Elizabeth Warren voters trying to hold their nose and pull the lever for this fucking guy,
right?
But like the candidate of anti-corruption and reining in Wall Street on a financial transaction.
If those are the viable options, if those are the options,
I mean,
I could see Elizabeth Warren voters, some of them going to Mayor Pete, maybe because I do see, right. Probably there's some
similar affect there,
right? Maybe some of the PMC crowd that thinks his 7 languages and his like McKinsey, meritocratic background or something is, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I think that's possible. But this guy, the Democratic Party as a whole has moved dramatically to the left relative to 2016 and very far to the left relative to 2008. And you're going to try to unite this guy who is not only a Wall Street billionaire, like the 8th richest person in the country, but who literally used to be a Republican and endorsed George W. Bush. The second worst president in history, I'd say, even including Trump, up to this time. And I'm like, I would really struggle to pull the lever for Bloomberg. I mean, I think I could probably do it if I got nice and liquored up for Mayor Pete on the day of the election. But Bloomberg, fuck me. Can you imagine that?
Here's the thing I want everyone to think about in talking to friends, family, and maybe we'll do an episode on this, how to talk to family about the Bernie campaign, especially those people who ideologically are different or don't necessarily think in ideological terms. Maybe they're more privileged, maybe they're more conservative, but specifically they just want to beat Trump. Maybe we can do an episode where we argue for why supporting Bernie is the way to go, for principle, but also for those that
tactical reasons.
For tactical strategic reasons. But I mean, the thing is, it's just, it's remarkable to see. I think, the reason that Buttigieg, Klobuchar, and Biden all kind of fared somewhat similarly with moderates is, how do you choose among people when you don't have ideological principles leading you, right? Like it's somewhat like if it's,
Yeah.
And so I just think that like going forward, the takeaway is remember to tell people, Bernie won, Bernie's electable, Bernie has a diverse coalition, Bernie is going to win, and has the best chance to beat Trump. But also like, what are your reasons for supporting someone else? Right. And like, it won't hold up when people try to talk to you about, supporting Bloomberg. Like there's no good reason to support other people unless you really are against giving other people healthcare or something. Right. Like,
I don't believe in that.
Yeah. Right. I don't know.
Let's get rid of that. But I think, that's probably a good place to leave it, but we'll keep a weather eye out for Storm Bloomberg. And, we got New Hampshire coming up, I believe, on Tuesday.
Right. Keep sharing those messages, whether on Twitter or social media or talking to friends about the great organizing and mobilizing success of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Right. Keep doing the work. Don't let this shit show in Iowa obscure all the hard labor that went into producing an amazing result, really.
Yeah, and I would say, just a note to all of the, for anyone who's campaigning for, Sanders, or even Warren in New Hampshire or Nevada or South Carolina, just keep on doing that work. Yeah. Let's just keep advancing Bernie over the line. We can handle the media shitstorm as best we can, right. Like
do the work,
knocking on doors,
talk to people who've never been on Twitter.
Yeah. That, God bless you.
Yes.
We're behind you.
Thank you.
And
work for Bernie, contribute to Bernie. And if you're a Warren person, we totally disagree with you and totally think you should throw your support and effort and money to Bernie. But we respect you because we would be pissed if Warren supporters told us that and if situations were reversed, we'd be pissed if we were going to be told that we had to flip over.
This is a Bernie podcast, but I think we still view Warren as the loyal opposition, as it were. Yeah. And
I mean, don't get me wrong. When the time comes and it seems like she's run out of money and has no path to victory, come on over, so we don't get fucking Bloomberg or somebody.
Please.
But in the meantime, fight for the rights and principles that the left really represents.
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll see you folks again very soon.
Everyone send Ryan happy birthday messages. It could be bladed if it's after Wednesday, but he's finally 21 now. He can.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Legally drink.
21 and going to a strip club right now.
Not true.
But thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you again very soon.
Bye-bye.